I guess my first significant memory from Castrol was going to the Thousand Lakes Rally in Finland. Castrol were very heavily into motorsport in those days. We were sponsoring the Toyota World Rally team. So we flew with some Toyota directors, a number of the Castrol people. We flew into Helsinki and then another 2 hours north to where the Thousand Lake Rally were. We then went into this very, very small village in the middle of nowhere, literally, and they told me where the hotel was and to go, and there would be some instructions in the room and to see them all in 30 minutes. When I entered the room was full of Castrol clothing. Rally jackets, red hats, green hats, white hats, gloves, t-shirts, everything coordinated. And it then gave me instructions. Today you wear all the red things, tomorrow the green, whatever. So I came out thinking, wow, I'm like a walking advertisement for the Castrol brand. And there's about 100 people in the square dressed identical. Our customers are, from dealers from all around Europe. It was a fantastic experience. Then we went down to the first rally stage, and there's a big 40-seated coach, liveried in the Castrol colours, serving out, beautiful food, 3-course meal. When all of our competitors' customers were eating hot dogs and sandwiches. So it really made me think Castrol was just a level above everybody else. A lot of people think when you leave university you have this career map, plan all mapped out. And maybe some people do. I didn't. And I guess I didn't because I didn't have the reference points and I didn't have anybody to help guide me along where this career could take me. So no, I didn't. I kind of went into a sales role, a management trainee sales role, and just kept on progressing. What I was very conscious of, though, was as my career was developing, I really did want to work internationally. So that's kind of one of the big milestones I had out there. My problem was I was becoming very senior in the UK with no international experience. So how do you make the move? Castrol allowed me to do that. And I took a job running the UK business for Castrol on the basis, and we agreed this, by the way, at the interview, that if I did well and turned the business around, I would get a shot internationally. So I think, a good lesson for people is be prepared to take some sideways moves if that's going to further you to the next one. In 40 years, you have lots of tough experiences as you go. I think the hardest time for me was when I was at St. Ivel. I joined at 33, I was the sales director, was very young, I had 4 very successful years, and really quite out the blue, they asked me to be the managing director. And probably looking back, it was a step too far, too quickly. But, I took it, who wouldn't? And just about 6 months into the job, the recession hit. We had a really big recession in the UK. So you had the market crashing, prices coming down. And I guess, again, things were happening. If I was in that position now, I would have been so far better able to cope with it, to handle it. And I just didn't have the experience. And unfortunately, from the parent company, I didn't have the support either. So it was one of the probably few times in my career where I was really beginning to wonder, could I do this job? Am I up to it? Is it right? But I'm going to tell you, the lessons I learned in that period probably put me in great stead for the next 20 years. Anyone can sail his ship in calm waters. The real people are the ones who can sail it in the choppy seas. So a European business, again, has lots of diversity. I mean, Europe's a big region. We're 27 countries in our European region. So it's hard to just, but I'd say most of these markets were fairly mature. And even the ones that weren't had a massive Western influence. So Eastern Europe, that had all spread out a lot from Germany. So you had this quite stable environment, big Western influence, almost a Western cultural approach, kind of fairly consistent. But an element of pessimism. Because most people in Europe think the good times are behind them. And that was quite an interesting one. How do you motivate people? The biggest change I had was when I moved to Singapore in 2001. Everybody was an optimist. Everybody in Asia believes the world's going to get better. And actually how you manage that is also a challenge, as well as the managing pessimism and optimism is a balance. So I think that was the biggest issue. And actually what you had to make sure is people didn't go too quickly in that environment and get themselves into a lot of trouble and grow too fast and not have the infrastructure or the people to grow the business. So that was the biggest change. The world is booming out there and managing the growth versus a flattish market environment was really hard. Well, I think, cultural and my attitude to life is that kind of I try to treat everybody as an equal. I come from an ordinary background, so I've never kind of seen myself as better than anybody. And I try to maintain that approach as I move through to fairly senior jobs. Now, friction, I mean, it's impossible to have a 4-year career without friction. And there were people I didn't get on with. I mean, I don't think it's possible. There were people I didn't agree with, didn't actually like their values or style. But you learn how to cope with that, and you learn to be non-confrontational when you can, and you learn to accept that people have different views and approaches. But it can be challenging. But I think I learned to be a lot more accommodating as I got older. I guess I was a bit more short-tempered in the early stages of my career, and it doesn't do you any good. So I think a little bit of patience, a little bit of recognition everybody's different is a really important thing. I've had so many experiences where I look back and could laugh over those years. At the time, I'm not sure I laughed. I was in a club in Bogota, Colombia, in the late 90s. And we were watching a show as a band on. And I looked over my shoulder to see people with camouflage, gun belts, machine guns, faces painted, bandanas. And I nudged my Colombian colleague and said, "Tell me they're the army." And he said, "Mike, I don't know." They came around, circled the club, went behind the bar, opened the tills, came around, searched me, everything, and then walked out. Fortunately, they were the army. If they'd been, because in those days, Colombia was the kidnap capital of the world. So I did think that we were into a proof of life situation. But fortunately, so I look back and I tell the story and laugh about it. I wasn't laughing at the time. So I think managing pressure is probably one of the most important things any business leader can do. And a lot of the business leaders I've seen that are poor leaders just drop the pressure down. And actually being a leader is as much about taking and holding the pressure. And again, in the Castrol world, we were doing very well, but there was a lot of pressure came from BP. And I tried not to put that on my team. I tried to shoulder that pressure. It wasn't bad pressure necessarily, it was just pressure to deliver more results. But if you just download it all, it can be damaging. I managed it by getting a balance with personal work. I'm not a one who believes in 7 days a week and 24 hours a day. I think you need to, the human body's like an engine. You need to switch it off and kind of let it rest or, reservice it. And I did that through regular exercise, social life, family, friends. And I was very fortunate. My wife used to say, "You never lose any sleep," and I don't. I could compartmentalize the business pressure and my personal life, and I could keep them separate. And I never let them hardly ever let them affect it. I mean, the global economic issues and crisis which have occurred a number of times over the last 40 years can have some big impacts upon your business. And how you deal with them can be quite significant. A critical one was Russia, where the Russian economy got itself into some serious problems. The ruble wasn't looking good. And a lot of Western countries just completely pulled their business in Russia. We had a good business. It still wasn't massively profitable, but we kind of felt we had the potential for big growth. We actually got ourselves to a situation where we stayed. But our customers had to pay cash with order. Now, we are talking about big orders, big cash. But we stuck with them, we stayed with them, we got them the product they needed, allowed them to stay in business, that kept them in business. As the economy picked up, they were very, very loyal to us and very, very grateful, because had we pulled, they would have gone out of business. And Russia then became one of our top 10 earners in the world. And that loyalty and mutual respect for each other, was such a big issue. So again, I think a big lesson there is when things go wrong, have a bit of patience and be prepared to stand by your customers and help them get through the difficult times rather than just cutting and running, as unfortunately a lot of companies actually do. So I'm not a big believer in regrets. I think regret is a wasted emotion. We all make our choices in life. We all decide, and then you've got to live with those decisions. And I often ask myself personally, business, if I could do it all again, would I do it differently? And I can think of a number of things that maybe, I maybe would have done differently. The problem with changing that it would have affected the very positive outcomes that I've had in my life. So I guess if you ask me to go back, no, I would leave it well. And I've done pretty well out of my life, my career. I'd leave well alone. That's how I'd leave it.